Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Today, we are going to talk a bit about how to master Drupal deployment cycle with a proper DevOps process. As you already know, I'm more of a WordPress guy. That's why I invited a whole team of Drupal specialists to help me. Guys, tell us a bit about yourself and about CyberDuck.
Yeah, cool. Hi, everyone. We're from CyberDuck. We're an award-winning digital transformation agency based in the UK, and we've been all growing organically for the last 17 years now, working mostly with Drupal and Laravel to deliver software as a service application and CMS solutions for clients, mostly in the UK, both in the private and public sector. And it's been amazing. So I'm Sylvain Reiter, the co-founder and chief delivery officer. So I come from a technical background and gone through the stages of deploying website manually via FTP to kind of building the whole dev team and growing the agency with a lot of experts, which brought me along today. Duncan and James, over to you.
Hi, I'm Duncan Worrell. I've been with CyberDuck for about almost 3 years. I'm a Drupal technical lead. So I'm the person who has to rely on my colleague here, James, to set up pipelines for me and Buddy so I can deploy things easily. So I'm very reliant on DevOps. So I'm here in our supporting capacity to try and answer any specific Drupal questions anyone might have. Over to you, James.
Thanks, Duncan. You make it sound so easy, Duncan, but I see it the other way around. I see that I'm here to support you to get your code into production. So that's good team synergy. So hello, everyone. My name's James. I'm the technical lead for DevOps at CyberDuck. Spend my day-to-day work engaged in engineering effort and helping our DevOps team to support our software engineering functions to deliver code into production faster.
And my name is Maciek Palmowski. I work here at Buddy as a WordPress ambassador and a regular webinar host. So before we'll get started, if you like our webinars, do not forget to press the subscribe button on YouTube. Thanks to this, you will be always informed about some new upcoming webinars, and we are really doing quite a few of them lately. And also, if you have any questions regarding Drupal DevOps or whatever our discussion will lead us today, don't hesitate to use either YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook comments to ask them. We'll try to respond to as many as possible in the end during the Q&A session. Okay, so let me start with the first question. Why Drupal? I mean, looking at the market share, Drupal has about 1.3%, and looking at the numbers, WordPress, Shopify, Wix, Squarespace, and Joomla. So why did you pick Drupal?
Yeah, I can start on the more like the business side, thinking about it from the end users or the clients, and then my colleague can talk on the tech and dev environments. But look, we decided at the time, several years ago, to start with Drupal. We tried actually a bit on WordPress as well and other off-the-shelf CMSs. But as the agency grew, we've realized that a lot of the projects were becoming more complex. And sometimes the client's requirements are a bit vague, where if it's just a corporate website, it might start small, saying, we just want a few pages and explain about us, having an online presence. But that was fine 10, 15 years ago. Nowadays, websites are much more interactive. There's much more connectivity with third-party systems. A lot of the marketing team rely on marketing automation tools. A lot of the more technical team wants to connect with CRMs and ERPs. And there's been obviously a lot of advances in the digital space. And those complex requirements needs an enterprise-ready platform. And we were just pushing the limits of WordPress, felt like that as we got bigger clients. Some issues around the security and regular updates, WordPress being the most popular platform in the world, is also probably the most attacked and vulnerable. So some of our corporate clients or even government bodies quickly moved away from that, and Drupal is the platform of choice in the UK specifically. The UK government is pushing a lot on the digital, everything around UX and agile, and on the technology side, promoting open source very heavily, and Drupal is one of the most used platforms. So it answers a lot of the business requirements. It complies with a lot of the top level and corporate requirements. So we felt that was the best platform, and it's proven us right. In the last few years, we've grown exponentially, and having a lot of Drupal projects coming in. So that was from the business side.
From a technical point of view, I was running a business at the time, and I had to decide on a CMS, and I looked at several CMSs, including WordPress and Joomla and some others. And I settled personally on choosing Drupal. It seemed to fit my use case. I needed to create lots of different types of content, and Drupal seemed to do that out of the box. I think with Drupal and WordPress is a conversation we could talk about probably for hours. WordPress is easier for sure. It's certainly easier for someone off the street to pick up and use. Drupal's quite hard, but that means it's also more powerful, I believe. So you end up in a situation where pretty much as Sylvain says, you could start a website with WordPress, and there's been plenty of surveys done on this, that as you become more proficient in WordPress, you become more and more frustrated with it. And the opposite is true with Drupal. The opposite is true because when you first start using it, you bang your head against the wall with it. Things are difficult, but the more you use it, the more you love it. And Drupal recognize that. The Drupal 10 comes out in December this year. And one of their big pushes is to make it easier out of the box. And that's very, very squarely aimed at the WordPress space at the moment. So for me, Drupal is a more powerful platform, arguably. But with that, you have a very good community that sits behind you. It's very obviously open source, which a lot of UK government contracts will mandate. You have to use an open source solution. And it's also very scalable, very performant, and very secure. Now, I know these are all buzzwords, but again, they're demonstrably, can't even say that word, true. Tonight there will be a security update for Drupal if they found anything, and they have a whole team of ethical hackers constantly trying to break Drupal. And that's not just Drupal core; it's Drupal contributed modules. So I like the fact that it's so dynamic. I like the fact that it's complicated. Because that complexity gives me the potential to create some really, really good websites for our clients. So that's why I like it.
James,
I can add
to that. It's fantastic. It's a really good point that Duncan makes about the complexity. I think that we, certainly in terms of engineering, many of us have experienced this paradigm whereby there are tools out there that make the simple things simple, but then when you try to apply them to the complex challenges, they actually make it more complex. It's kind of that kind of classic paradigm, really, that there are tools that make simple jobs simple but make more complex jobs. As soon as you want to move outside the kind of confines of the functionality, you're into kind of uncharted territory. Whereas certainly from the work I experienced, the teams at Cyberduck doing, it seems like, in the Drupal space, we have a good framework to build functionality according to, the Drupal community's ideas, but we also have plenty of scope to build our own, tools and processes outside of that where necessary. And that includes things like partnerships, partnering with companies like Acquia to provide cloud services, and the kind of benefits that they provide. We can talk about that a little bit later.
Okay, so like our topic says, we will be talking a bit about DevOps processes. So why do we even need DevOps? I mean, apart from using this really nice buzzword, because DevOps is so cool, right?
Yeah. So I think I can talk to this one. I think Sylvan can tell us why he thinks it's important too, so we can hear both sides. So my background is mostly in engineering, really, software engineering and infrastructure. And so I kind of, have more of a kind of traditional engineering point of view on this, but also, understand the history. So, say 5 or 10 years ago, the traditional paradigms in this industry in software engineering are that there are two independent and distinct teams which are working towards common business objectives, but quite often have different priorities. And those two teams, as the name implies, would have been development and operations. Right. So the job of development is to build functionality, build software, move quickly, produce features, add value to the business. That's one side of the coin, is the development. The other side of the coin is the operations. The people in operations, their responsibilities are keep systems running, maintain stability, change control processes that are very rigid are beneficial to them. And so these two competing forces have often had a kind of siloed approach to their common goals. Developers produce software quickly and want to get it into production in front of their business users quickly to deliver value quickly. Operations teams want to maintain stability, so they can be more resistant to change and less willing to push regular changes because of the processes that are involved in doing that, quite often manual, rigorous reviews. So this is where DevOps comes in. It's the amalgamation, the coming together of two different kinds of effort, really, the coming together of development and operations, developers and operations people, really in a kind of in a culture of DevOps. So the key function of any DevOps team, any DevOps engineer, is to empower their colleagues to deliver functionality to the business as quickly as possible. In Cyberduck, for example, we have a DevOps engineering team who work with every team in the business, front-end developers, back-end developers, design, user experience, QA, these teams all working together to deliver change quickly. And the main way we do that is through culture, is by embracing the culture of DevOps, which is a kind of spin-off of an agile principle, to deliver value quickly into the business. And the tools and processes that support that are pretty kind of ubiquitous across different disciplines. So, if that means, for example, automation, we can apply that automation to our back-end development, to our front-end development, to our testing, to our server deployments. All these areas can benefit from the DevOps culture without needing to be a DevOps team, so to speak, themselves. We imbibe the culture in the business, and then everyone has the value of it.
I really like that you are talking about DevOps as a culture inside of a company rather than what some try to say, that those are tools, those are specific roles. No, it's all about the culture, about the way how we work. So yeah, I fully agree with you.
I think you quite often find that it's a really interesting point. You quite often find that in the teams who see DevOps as only a specific job role, they tend to actually be not really doing DevOps; they're just doing ops, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's like we took operations, we took these rigid structures, we applied some cool tooling to it, and we're calling it DevOps. But it doesn't work in reality unless you have the culture. And to be perfectly transparent, one of the main challenges with the culture is delivering that culture to every part of the business. You need complete buy-in on every level. You need buy-in from stakeholders, from directors, from people in positions of management, and in engineering, in customer relations, in new business. You need buy-in completely throughout, because if you don't have it, what you end up with is you end up trying to shoehorn the DevOps process at the last part of the process, and then it just doesn't work. There's frustrations throughout. So my experience is that the best DevOps businesses embrace that culture and imbibe it into the core of their being, into their strategies, their business processes, their identities, and they live it and breathe it. They don't just say, "That's your job, you go do DevOps," right? it doesn't really work like that. You could call that person an automation engineer, perhaps, but it's not DevOps.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
And what about the business side of DevOps, Silvan?
Yeah, for me, main reason to use DevOps is the ability to scale and scale kind of safely or confidently. Because we all started, I guess, as kind of web developers in our bedroom, kind of deploying our first websites. And when you're alone, it's fine. You work on your own code. You then can push to FTP, and like you manage all of that. You have to control everything, and you do the front end, the back end. You create your hosting account, and you have to do your DNS things, and then that's fine when you're on your own. But as soon as you have a bigger project, or you start building in a team, or kind of multiple developers start working together, it's not scalable. So DevOps allows you to minimize risk and increase efficiency. Minimizing the risk by automating some of the steps. So deploying code by FTP or overwriting each other, or all of that, it's prone to many errors. I'm sure we've all done them, where you forgot to deploy a file, or you don't apply the right changes to the right config item, or something missing somewhere in your pipeline. And so reducing human errors through automation is one of the main business benefits. And the other one is maximizing efficiency, because with the rise of cloud technologies, we don't have to wait 2 weeks to deploy dedicated servers in a rack, or you don't have to wait for the next release. Like some clients still have like a yearly release schedule, where if you want something deployed in your app, you need to wait another 6 months for the next deployment cycle or something. So again, the efficiency of applying that automation and the automated testing, all of the benefit of DevOps bring confidence to the team, not just the developers, but also the management, that things can move much quicker, and you can deploy to testing environments with almost every day, and the deployment to production is one click, and so many benefits that the efficiency just goes through the roof. And that's why we're using it on every single project now.
Mm-hmm. So if we could sum up, what are the benefits for each group, for developers, for clients, for managers? How would you say?
Shall I talk about developers? Because I haven't spoken for ages now. So I think for developers, we've covered much of it. It's repeatable processes. As a Drupal developer, we want to develop a Drupal solution, and normally we'd be doing that on our local systems, our Macs, or whatever we're using. So, but to get that stuff deployed, we don't want the hassle. We don't want the thing. Okay, how do I do deployment? But what we want to do is have a pipeline set up where we click a button, and it does it. It's a repeatable pattern that we know is the same every single time, and we know we can go into testing, so we can do our QA cycle. We also want that same process to be in place when we deploy to our staging environment, so we can perform user acceptance testing. And clicking the same button with the same pipeline gives us a great amount of confidence that we're going to deploy exactly the same thing in exactly the same way, so we can test it. And also, of course, for the final deployment into production when we go live. So it gives us a repeatable pattern. Something that I think Silva mentioned about being able to spin up new instances quickly. That hasn't been around for very long. It's only, I guess we're talking about cloud instances. Still, I need a new server, spin one up. I don't want to do that, really. I can leave that to DevOps. And then they can repeat or effectively clone a pipeline for us. And we know it's just going to work exactly the same as every other pipeline we deploy. So for devs, it allows us to concentrate on our development, but it gives us a huge amount of confidence that when we do deploy stuff, that it's going to every single instance in exactly the same way. So that's the biggest benefit, I think, from a development point of view.
Yeah, and business, as I said before, the increase the frequency of release, I guess, would be the main benefits. Like, where mostly you still need to wait for the developers to do their part, but in terms of releasing features to a product or to an application, any system really, it's the guarantee that there is an automated deployment process, there is a rollback step of being involved, and again, all of that takes time to build over time. It's not one tool that will do all of that. And so that James was mentioning, this agile methodology and this notion of continual improvement. So you can always improve your process, both from the dev and the ops side as well. So it's just part of this agile culture, agile methodology to continually improve the process and make it more efficient, more secure, more scalable, and bring more confidence to the business. Yeah.
And what about clients? What are the biggest benefits from? For them?
From clients, it's a good one as well. I would say lower costs overall, even though it's a bit of a higher investment. There's kind of additional roles, additional tools that you might need to subscribe to. So you could see at the beginning there's a bit of a the initial phases requires a bit of upfront investment, but I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years now. The benefits you just kind of get are amazing, and you make whatever the original investment was, you make that up in the first couple of months, probably in your first few sprints. It already pays off because it saves time. The developer can focus on building actual features and not having to worry or repeat deployments that are failing. So again, higher efficiency, lower cost, and more confidence.
It's lower risk, isn't it? We're talking about lower risk. We're talking about risk to the if you're reducing your costs, increasing your efficiencies, you're reducing your risk to the business running out of money for your project. Also, the risk of having a deployment go wrong. That's the worst thing. You make a deployment and it goes wrong. It just doesn't happen really anymore. We've got a large amount of confidence, particularly as we're deploying with the same pipeline across different instances. We've tested it on 2 or 3 different places, so it reduces the risk for live deployments. And that's reducing risk is always good. It's one of those things you don't notice until you lose it. Having a pipeline that works every single time, it can be a little bit au fait about it. DevOps is easy. We just hit the button and it deploys. Those pipelines have been developed over years of experience. So a good DevOps team knows how to set up a pipeline well, knows how to create the server correct in the first place, knows how to put all those things that start with CF in front of things, CloudFront, what's the other one? Cloud Foundry. There's like hundreds of them. All begin with CF. They had to put all those things in place, so you don't have to worry about them, and that decreases the risk to the business, which ultimately saves money. And I guess that's what we're talking about, isn't it? Making things more efficient.
And we interviewed a client actually last year about the DevOps process that we applied and why they selected us to run it for them, a global kind of corporate website. And he's saying, as it was more from the IT side, but client side, that trust is earned with confidence. And unfortunately, in being in IT, he was struggling to connect with his marketing team, was kind of owning the product, because there was delays in releases. There was discrepancy between environments. So they were testing something in UAT and that was fine, but on production it stopped working, or it was not behaving the same way, or some of the jobs or the config were different. And then every time he couldn't really have good answers for his marketing team, saying like, it's just IT, it fails sometimes. And so complete lack of confidence. And everything was taking longer. It was difficult to add new features, and it's just overall very inefficient. So with DevOps that applied throughout the whole life cycle and rebuilding, kind of migrating to AWS and building a proper pipeline and applying the agile methodology, now they're in a much better position. And him being in IT is almost not involved anymore. The marketing team runs it, and they deploy when they give us the go-ahead for the deployment. It's happening without IT involvement. So it's all very happy clients.
I can understand it. Okay, so I think now it's time for the part that most of us are waiting for. So how do you deploy Drupal using Buddy? Let me share your screen already, James, because I know now the scene is yours. Go for it.
Thanks. So, as Duncan said quite rightly, when we're running deployments to with sites for clients in CyberDuck, it's usually actually the development team that are running those deployments. It's not the DevOps engineering team. The whole purpose of DevOps, as I said earlier, is to empower business users to deliver quicker. So we like to build automations as much as possible and use those automations to allow our developers to release their own code. I think everyone's made really good points about kind of, standardization, automation, all the benefits they provide. I think it can't be understated how beneficial it is that a single click of a button through automation, we can enable a consistent release process by anyone. The kind of the days of centralizing that knowledge and that control in a silo, and all the risks that come along with that, they're kind of long gone with DevOps, certainly in CyberDuck. So what I'm showing you today is a website. It's a website for the Commonwealth Secretariat, obviously very well-known public institution. CyberDuck built this website for the Commonwealth Secretariat as a project. It's obviously based on Drupal, hence being used as a demonstration for today. The tooling that we used for this is for the DevOps aspects. This is hosted within AWS. So we're using many of the AWS well-known services like EC2 to provide us with compute and load balancers. We're using RDS, for example, to provide MySQL database service. And we're using many of the other supporting services too, like the usual ones, S3 for your file storage and IAM for your identity and access management. So how does Buddy tie into all this? This is the question. Well, if you take a look at our pipelines in Buddy, this is the user interface through which our developers can deploy their code. Within CyberDuck, we've got a few different environments for this particular client. And if we take one of them, for example, we can see that we've got a history of the different runs that were executed against this environment. This is the testing environment for this client. Building this within Buddy for us is a simple case of using the interface that we see here and quite often copying the existing examples we have for other clients. If we look at the steps that are actually required to build and launch a site, a Drupal site onto AWS, it's really straightforward. And there's lots of scope to add additional steps and functionalities as required. So in this case, this is the most basic example, which is each of the steps being executed sequentially in order. So first of all, we're performing our composer steps. So that's, instantiate composer, install our dependencies, run config checks, etc. All of those things are executed within the step here. I can click through to it and I can get more information about that step. You can see, for example, the manual steps that we're taking here. And something that's interesting to note is that all of these steps are being executed within containers. So we know that we can change the container that this is running within and tailor the specific step to the functionality. In this case, we're actually using our generic PHP container that we built within CyberDuck with many of our common dependencies to run our composer installs. So for the first step is composer. The next step is we execute our front-end build. We're installing node packages, running builds, building our assets, which are ultimately going to be deployed to AWS. From there, we're configuring AWS. So this means within Drupal, we've obviously got different config files, right? And the config files vary depending on environment. So if we're running locally, we have local development credentials. If we're running in production, we have production credentials. And in this case, we're swapping out the config files within the artifact that we're generating to ensure that the application will run in production, that things like database connection strings are in the right place, URLs are set correctly, and so on and so forth. As this is a testing site, we have some HTTP basic auth in front of it. This is just one of the steps that we take to protect the non-production environments from web crawlers who would otherwise index it, and you'd have your testing site appear on Google. Not a particularly sophisticated security mechanism or anything. It's a public site after all, just a means to keep it out of search engines in a simple, consistent way that we can use across projects because it's in our pipeline. The main two steps which perform the majority of the heavy lifting are actually templates which we use directly from Buddy. We're using technology within AWS called Elastic Beanstalk. Elastic Beanstalk allows us to provision compute environments and have great benefits like auto scaling, automatic security updates, automatic monitoring, automatic rollbacks of problematic releases, all these kind of quite, enterprise grade, sophisticated compute features of cloud environments can come out of the box in Buddy when we deploy through their pipeline. Once we've deployed the code, we monitor it. A key part of the process is, in the cases of our clients, we have fault-tolerant, highly available cloud infrastructures. What that means really is that everything has multiple redundant copies. So if you take the kind of traditional servers paradigm, which is what we'd call compute, that's got redundancies. We're running multiple different compute engines across multiple Amazon availability zones. So there's redundancy both geographically and also within the technology. And it also allows us to scale to meet demand as required. We can add additional servers, additional compute capacity to meet increased traffic demand, particularly important for a public site. So this is our monitoring step, monitors the release of our code as it's gone into AWS. And then in this case, the Commonwealth is using the Cloudflare service, which is a very well-known kind of all-in-one networking service company who are providing, amongst other things, a web application firewall for security, content delivery network for performance, and a number of other kind of routing and auditing-based services for the site. We want to clear the cache from that. Obviously, after we've run a deployment, things usually change. We want users to get the latest version of the site. So again, we use the built-in Buddy integration to achieve that. And then within CyberDuck, we try to encourage communication, especially with our automated tools. So whenever a deployment's run, we're popping a notification into our Slack channel just to let the developers, the engineering team know that a deployment's been executed, and we give the output of that, whether it's been successful or there's a challenge that they need to review. This is all information that's fed back every time a deployment's run. It's worth saying that these pipelines that we're executing here, whether they're production, staging, testing, or even a CI pipeline, a continuous integration pipeline, which would be run every time an event is triggered, these can all happen either manually or in an automated fashion. So if, for example, you had a testing environment and you wanted to deliver value very quickly, you might configure this pipeline through the settings so that it will run on any action that your developers take. So if a developer adds a feature that's bleeding edge and they want to get it to testing as quickly as possible, we can use Buddy's built-in functionality to make this pipeline run as soon as a change is committed to the version control technology, to Git. So the developer makes their change, they commit it to Git, they save it, they push it, and then straight away the pipeline is moving that into the testing environment to get it in front of internal stakeholders or testers, for example. What does this actually look like when you're running it? Well, I mean, we can run it. It's really simple. You click run, you scroll to the bottom, you run, it's running, right? That's a deployment. So the process.
James,
sorry.
And let me just ask you one question, because this is one question that came in our comments, and it's really about the thing that you said. Does the monitoring deploy monitoring tools or just monitor if the deployment went okay?
Good question. So the monitoring is, so to clarify, the monitoring is not deploying monitoring tools. It's monitoring the rolling release that Elastic Beanstalk is carrying out. So that's monitoring to make sure that the current release happens successfully. The monitoring tools is a separate thing again, which just to clarify the distinction, we're using Buddy to provide the pipeline which allows us to move code from our development environments into either production or non-production environments. The monitoring is monitoring to make sure that that release happens correctly within AWS, within the cloud environment, that it doesn't roll back. If it actually has to roll back, you get what we see here. Let's see, the first one has got a red cross against it. We executed a production deployment. There was a challenge. It was rolled back. And as part of that rollback, we saw that the monitoring flagged that there was an issue here and an engineer is working on that. So yes, that is monitoring the deployment. That's not monitoring the infrastructure. As far as infrastructure monitoring goes, many tools, we can probably talk about that more in a whole nother talk. We use a fairly diverse set of tools for monitoring depending on the needs. most of which are, fairly well known in the industry, many of which are specifically within AWS if we're using AWS. And, how are they configured? Probably another topic entirely, but we're using infrastructure as code, so Terraform to build infrastructure for clients, which also then feeds into the reproducible and cross-transferable value that we can deliver.
Okay, yeah. So at the moment we are waiting for the deployment, because I always remember that Beanstalk can take a while.
Yeah. So the way that this is possibly a digression, but I find it quite interesting. The way that Elastic Beanstalk works is it's a platform as a service, right? We might have heard this term before, PaaS. There are many different platform as a service offerings out there in the tech industry. You could use Azure, you could use web apps, you could use Elastic Beanstalk on AWS, you could use platform.sh, you could, the Cloud Foundry is another common one that we use. There are lots of different choices out there for a platform as a service, but the fundamental principle is that you provide it with a artifact, usually a website, and it takes care of deploying that to the infrastructure for you. So it reduces the management overhead required and increases your time to deliver, because you're focusing on building pipelines to deliver content, not on maintaining complex infrastructures. You abstract that infrastructure away and use the automation tools to enable that. So that deployment's completed now. Deployment to our testing environment is done. Cache has been cleared. Notification in Slack. So that's it. We're done. We've run our deployment. It's as simple as that.
And what happens if something fails?
So it depends. It's a complex question with a complex answer. It depends at what step it fails. So if, say, the Composer install step fails, the pipeline is configured to just exit at that point because nothing's actually been changed outside of Buddy. In that case, we can just run it again or correct the problem and debug it. If it's the actual AWS deployment step that fails, then AWS will roll back the version that's been deployed and return us to a safe state. So the idea is that we want to, in all cases, fail safe. We want to fail closed. So if there's a failure, we roll back with automation. The advantage of that method is that if a failure occurs, which, let's face it, things happen, then we always know that we're going to be left with a working functional site. We're not going to be left in a kind of broken state. That behavior is all configurable within our pipelines. So if we go, for example, to our actions, we go to Composer, we can define what happens when an error occurs. What do we do? Do we carry on? Do we stop? What are things like timeouts? Do we auto retry? These are all options that we have to configure straight here within the user interface.
Okay, and so another question I have is a bit more related to what other hosting companies from the AWS are you using?
Do you want to talk to this, Silv, or shall I talk to this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So historically, Cyberduck were using Rackspace, which is a well-known kind of UK-based consultancy company providing mostly kind of physical hardware, but also more recently cloud services and consultation. I think Rackspace are pivoting now towards cloud as well, but kind of historically it was more kind of bare metal servers, physical machines in racks, and that worked very well for Cyberduck, when the relationship began, and it's worked very well for a long time. But as we've adopted more DevOps principles, those kind of traditional relationships didn't work so well. We needed direct hands-on with the cloud platforms themselves as our internal engineering teams grew. So nowadays we have a small relationship with Rackspace, but for the most part, we're working with AWS, with Microsoft on Azure. We're working with Acquia on their various cloud platforms. And there are a few small other engagements as well, Laravel Forge, for example, where we're doing Laravel development. But the main kind of three really are AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Acquia, where with, I think, all three, right, Sil? We're partners Microsoft.
Yeah, all three. Yeah. So it depends on the client's requirements or what's best suited for each job, basically. So with the Acquia relationship, some client wanted the no-code editor of Drupal to kind of drag and drop landing pages and blocks on pages, and the Acquia Site Studio is a great product for that, and obviously it's bundled within their hosting services. You get one, the other comes with it, or you need the other one when you buy Site Studio. So we kind of bundle that, and adjusted kind of minor tweaks to our deployment process. There was a question actually in the chat I saw as well from Selwyn about the Acquia deployments. I know James had prepared some for that. Can you explain a bit about the BLT tool and how we've kind of hooked that up on the Acquia side?
Yeah, I don't know whoever was paid to ask that question. It's a great question because I actually prepared a very small example of that. So so Acquia is providing us with BLT tool, which is the build and launch tool. Acquia as a company are offering many services. Some are focused around kind of infrastructure and cloud computing. Some are focused around software consultancy and everything in between, really. They're providing also some pipeline functions, and while in this case it was actually more beneficial for us to stay for the most part with Buddy for those functions. And we can probably talk more about why we chose to stay with Buddy for those pipeline functions in a minute. But for now, I'll simply say they provide lots of different services. And so for us as an engineering team, as a development team, it's very important to understand, when you've got that many services at your disposal, which ones actually best meet our needs and the needs of the client. So in this case, we chose to use BLT to effectively build an artifact and push it up to Acquia Cloud, where Acquia would then handle the automated deployment of that onto the infrastructure that they're managing. So in this case, we've got a pipeline which is running the BLT tool. Effectively, the first few lines are kind of internal housekeeping, but within a Docker Composer, we're basically just running these two commands, which is just a straight up Composer install, and then using BLT, using the artifact deploy command, specifying the branch we want to deploy to, and that will take care of the deployment for us. I don't have a live demonstration prepared of this one, but the kind of process for BLT in this case is that it will take the artifact, the code base. It will take the code base, create an artifact from it, running optional kind of hooks and scripts. It will create an artifact and then push it up to a remote Git endpoint. And then once it's in that remote Git endpoint, an event is triggered, and Acquia handles the deployment of that into the environment that we specified. There's lots of other things going on within BLT. It's well worth reading the documentation. We're using BLT more in local development as well to enable some cool features that we don't have with other frameworks. So things like linting on commit and checking of checking commits for kind of quality, and some testing and local platform hooks. All these kind of things we're using BLT for locally as well. That's kind of outside the scope of Buddy.
Yeah, but I don't. I mean, at the end of the day, Acquia is just another flavor of Drupal, so it's very much part of this discussion. Acquia has a way of doing things, very much. It's very opinionated in a technical sense of the word. So when we first started using Acquia a couple of years back, we did certainly have to look at our DevOps pipelines and say, how on earth are we going to fit those with how we want to do things? There was some discussion at the time about the best way to do it, but we definitely have a good way of doing it now, which I think James has talked about. So it's a different way of deploying. But the same is true as some other platforms we host. We also host platform.sh, and also gov.uk PASS is another hosting solution I'm personally quite involved with on a daily basis across 2 or 3 different projects. So there's always a way. particularly with Acquia, we wanted to carry on doing some of the things we were doing on our other projects. So again, we have a constant approach across many projects, but also use those BLT tools to make best use of the great things that Acquia D provides. So it was quite a bit of a hybrid approach we used with deploying Acquia, and I think we got it nailed.
Okay, yeah, and tell me, because James showed us some basics of how you deploy Drupal, but I know that every CMS has some quirks. Every CMS needs some polishing near the end. So how does it look like with Drupal? Probably Duncan will help here.
Yeah, with Drupal, if you read the documentation again, the way of deploying a Drupal website is you take it back up, you copy the code up, and then you have to run a number of commands, either from your browser or from the command line. Those people here listening who are familiar with Drupal will hopefully have heard of Drush, which is basically the Drupal command line interface, shell interface, Drush. So what we typically do for deployments for all of our Drupal websites is we have a post-installation hook in Buddy that runs three main commands, and hopefully most people will be familiar with this. So we run drush update DB, which allows us to run all our update hooks. It allows us to tweak the database, delete files, those sorts of functional changes you want to deploy as part of your software update. We also do a couple of configuration imports. Configuration imports can be configured so that they're different for each environment. So you'll have one for testing, one for staging, and one for production. So we run that twice. The reason we run it twice is often the first one does most of everything, and then the second one tidies everything up. And then the fourth command we run is we do a cache rebuild. So yeah, drush CR. And we can build those straight into the pipeline, which means we end up with what we're after is a one-button deployment process, and we can look as James jumped into the deployment. And what I love about Buddy is that user interface is so intuitive. You won't need any training to use Buddy, so you can come into each one of those steps and see what it's doing. You'll see the error messages in there in red. It's good. I did a deployment this morning at 7:30 this morning with a big government project, and they come onto the meetings with us, and they watch us do the deployment through Buddy, and we go into those things and we show them Buddy. It gives the client a huge amount of confidence that that's what we saw last time. That's what we're expecting to see, and it's. Okay, some of the commands James is showing a code, but when you're running deployment and clients can see the progress going through and nothing red and moving on to the next step, it gives them a large amount of confidence, and we're more than happy to show clients Buddy. From a personal point of view, I just love the way Buddy looks. It's great, and very occasionally Buddy have made a change and we've gone, oh, we don't like that. And you can, there's a chat icon, bottom corner. I've gone in and said, I don't like what you've changed. And they said, oh, a few people have said that. We'll change it back. And lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, it's fixed. And that's for me. And I know this is a Buddy webinar, but that's very responsive. just to make small changes to make our lives easier. Yeah, checks in the face, as I say. So so. To answer the question, that there is a whole lot of post-installation that happens in a Drupal project. We can automate that through Buddy pipelines.
Yeah,
an interesting question from Mark just now. Then, would you give the client you did this morning the release? Would you give them the trigger to deploy? I think we have enough confidence in Buddy for them to do it. Yeah, we
could do. We don't, as it happens. We have quite a sophisticated runbook for this client. They're a government organisation, so we have a lot of checkpoints we go through, but we also share the runbook with them, so they can see us, saying, yeah, done. And quite near the bottom, it's deploy through Buddy. We click the button, so it's a long.
We do that for some clients. So we have specific cases where clients approach us for DevOps services. You know, if they want to help us to use our knowledge to apply to their business to improve their delivery, they've heard about the benefits of DevOps, they'll come to us and say, you know, we'd like you to consult with us on how we can improve our release processes, our DevOps culture. And we'll actually build pipelines for them in Buddy, you know, maybe even build infrastructure using infrastructure as code tools like Terraform. And we'll build the AWS environment for them, and we'll build the Buddy pipeline, and they will perhaps have their own development team, their own software engineers, and we'll kind of build those tools, educate them on the culture, provide the consultancy, and then kind of hand it over to them. And they then do run their own deployments through the tooling. So I think the answer is like what Sylv said earlier, right? The best tool for the job, and also the case that each organization is usually different, right? So different people, different companies need and want different things. And so what's really important is the flexibility. This is something that we've not kind of really touched on, but it is very important to us as a company at Cyberduck that Buddy allows us to deploy to, you know, any platform you could imagine, really, with any kind of technology you could imagine. If you can script it, if you can automate it, you can use Buddy to deploy it, to enable that process, to enable the DevOps culture within your business. So, for example, if we're deploying a Drupal site to Acquia, or a Laravel app to AWS, or anything in between, right, we can use Buddy to enable common workflows that allow us to do those things. So we don't have to use Azure DevOps for the Microsoft Azure stuff. We don't have to use code commit on AWS or pipelines. We don't have to use Acquia pipelines if we don't want to. We can kind of contain our knowledge and our processes within one location, and then just build out integrations as required. I mean, most of them are out of the box anyway with Buddy. So
yeah, and if needed, it's also very easy to change this one block. So, for example, you were using AWS, but at some point you want to switch to Azure or whatever. So we are just changing one block, and the rest of the pipeline stays almost the same. So this is also something great. And tell me, because we talk about deploying things, but how else do you use Buddy? What else do you automate using it?
I'll jump in really quickly. Some of the things we use it for. Strangely, gov.uk Pass has no ability to create cron jobs. So we have periodically running scripts on our Drupal websites that effectively replace cron. So that's one thing we use Buddy for. James has already talked about, you know, CI/CD. We also use it for obviously running automated testing, which is, you know, triggered based on commits. And things like that. So that you can use it for a lot of things. The deployment I was talking about earlier on this morning is a blue-green deployment. So there's an ability in Buddy to come to a point and pause and say, "Are you ready to continue?" And at that point, our client goes in, does a smoke testing, go, "Yeah, we're happy to swap over." We click a button, it swaps two instances over. Our blue-green swaps. I never know which one's which, blue-green or green-blue. Anyway, it swaps over. And again, it's automated, so we know it's worked. It just brings us a huge amount of confidence that it's working. Right. Do you want to jump in about anything else, James? Testing or?
We're using it in a few different places. I mean, we're kind of, in some cases, we're almost using it as a kind of drop in for services like AWS Lambda, where we want serverless compute, right? So there are cases where. So give you a really solid example. We use a very well-known off-the-shelf software as a service product to host our Git repos. I don't think it's super private. We use Bitbucket for many of our projects. And one of the main challenges of using Bitbucket Cloud for us has been that there's no kind of, you know, being a software as a service product, there's no kind of out-of-band backups of that, right? So, you know, Atlassian is obviously a huge company, and you know, we trust in them in their software as a service product. But at the same time, we wanted that guarantee that we could have a local offline out-of-band backup of all our Git repos. You know, if something catastrophic were to happen to Atlassian, and I'm sure it never will, but build redundancies into your systems and all that, we wanted to take an offline copy of our backups. So what we did is actually built a Buddy pipeline that would execute on a cron using Docker, and built a very small kind of microservice in Laravel in PHP to enable us to query the Bitbucket API, pull away copies of each of our repos, and zip them up, encrypt them, transfer them to an offsite backup location. And we do that on a cron every month within Buddy. So that's a really good example of how we're using it not just for deployments, we're using it not just for continuous integration, not just scheduled tasks on platforms that don't support it, but also to support our business operations. I mean, that's almost an IT function. You know, we're kind of we're empowering every part of the business really using Buddy as a tool. So it's been very versatile for us.
And then there's new, Google Lighthouse released an API recently as well, and we're looking at ways to automate accessibility testing, performance testing, because there is an API endpoint. We can write a script and trigger it with Buddy. So on top of the AWS monitoring tool, we could also run a post-deployment check on performance or accessibility, or pre-deployment probably, I would say, for accessibility, like render the code and make sure everything is still compliant, or you could have those triggers either pre or post deployment to add additional, again, confidence to the business in other areas. Security, pen test as well, potentially, make sure we don't think something we started exploring as well. So it's something you could run as well, make sure that every deployment you're not opening up a new vulnerabilities. And that's all the future we're looking into now.
Yeah, James mentioned we use it for own backups, but it's something you can also you could allow devs to take a backup of servers as well from Buddy. You try and keep devs away from the shell on the live system, you need to know basis and all that. But quite often you will need a local copy of the production database, or certainly a sanitized copy of the local database. We tend to employ a solution where we will clone from production to staging. And part of that clone process, we obfuscate the data, and then we allow the devs to, get very easily to those staging backups, which then they can bring locally, and they know they're working on the most recent copy of the database. So all those things can be done in Buddy. The end of the day, it's a tool which is created for deployments, but you can use it for a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that at some point while playing around with IFTT, I connected Buddy to Spotify, and every time my push to server succeeded, it played Eye of the Tiger. I mean, after 2 pushes, it got a bit annoying, but yeah, I did it. It worked. So when it comes to practical use cases, I think my was the least useful. But if someone needs to, it's really possible. And
I think we should implement that on all our Buddy pipelines, James. Raise a ticket.
Hold on, I'm just going to revoke Duncan's access. Hold on. With great power comes great responsibility, to use a cliche.
Yeah, exactly. But that is true. And so because you mentioned a bit about accessibility, and I was thinking, what else are you thinking about implementing in your pipelines? Because yes, this the accessibility thing, this is something very important. I can tell you already that Buddy plays really nicely with X CLI. So this is the first example, and this is also a great way to start testing applications. But what else?
Yeah, it's the main thing is security, accessibility, and performance, really, because it impacts now SEO. It impacts kind of most of the business metrics. It's the law for accessibility from all public institutions. There's I think there's a lot more improvements we're looking at on the front end as well, in terms of compressing things, caching assets. But yeah, there's a lot of tools, so we need to find what works best for our process. Start small, build a proof of concept, get management and clients on board, and then we can expand our services on that, which hopefully it's build one and reuse many times. Once, as James explained, once we've done it, we can clone it to all our other clients. So it'd be a great benefits for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, I really can't wait when you will start adding those things. So we will have for sure a next topic for a webinar, right? How
Yeah,
to
sounds good, yeah.
evolve, how to evolve your pipeline during the year or months. We have some questions from the audience that we got before from the signups. So I think it's time for the Q&A. So let's start with this one. What is the best deploy process?
I'll start. I would say it's whatever works for you. It really depends of what stage of the journey you're on. If you're still deploying manually, then the best one would be one that saves you time or one that gives you more confidence. So you don't have to feel like the next release is going to be the most stressful part of your week, or you have to wake up in the middle of the night to fix something. So just start small, automate the most time consuming and the riskiest part of the process, or whatever it could be. And yeah, that would be the best one for you. But obviously for our more advanced and corporate or public sector deployment, when we've been improving them for several years, then yeah, it's going to be continually improving. So I think that's it's hard to say which one will be best. They'll all be best in the future.
I think, like James said at the beginning, the DevOps, the term, came from the Agile methodology. And I think Sylvan sort of said the same thing there. Effectively, is the best thing to fix is your biggest pain point, or the thing that keeps going wrong the most, or the thing that which you have to struggle around scraps of paper trying to work out how to do things. Automate those things, and I'm a big believer in constantly changing one thing and seeing whether it works. And if it didn't work, you back it out. So the best deployment process is probably the next one you're about to write, because you should always be constantly improving. Agile is not about being nimble so much; it's about constant iteration, of constant improvement. So the best deployment process is the one you're going to write tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's for sure. The next question we have: how to shift database changes using Drupal?
We've sort of already covered that. That's the update DB script, which we can run as part of post installation. So Drupal has a really good mechanism for running post-update hooks. And those post-update hooks sit at module level and indeed at core level. So basically what happens is you can write a script, it's a PHP script, with a particular designation. And when you do the deployment, Drupal will look through all those scripts and go, oh, I've run that one, I've run that one, I've run that one. Oh, I've not run that one, I'll run this one. And it basically gives you a list of all those it's about to run, and then it will run them. So you can use those scripts to do all manner of things. A good use case is a contributed module might change the database schema, and it needs to move some columns around into the new schema. And that will happen automatically when that module updates in Drupal. So you may not even know that change is about to happen, but running the update DB script just automates that process. And because we're automating that, the running of the update DB script as part of the Buddy pipeline, then all those things will happen automatically. And of course, you can write your own custom scripts as well, which run as part of that process. If you need to do any housekeeping or creating content automatically, you can do that as part of the custom module custom update. So it's built into Drupal and it's initiated through the Buddy pipeline.
I understand. Yeah. So in short, it depends, right? Yeah, our favorite IT answer for everything. And the next thing: how to break the traditional engineering habit to a DevOps mindset for engineers and management. Yeah, this is really something interesting.
Yeah, there's a few points. I guess for me, looking, from the top would be, as I said, it's a bit on investment, and there might be some pushback because it is a change, and maybe James can talk about the culture element like he did at the beginning, but it's about bringing confidence. Yeah, the main thing, the way to break is to break that mistrust, I guess, or to change the habits, is to show the benefits. Like because you can have even the tiniest step added to your process that can make a huge difference. And as I said, our pipeline have been in the build for several years, but start small, like show your team how safe and how much better it can be just by automating the most painful element. And that could be the beginning of change. I think that's how it started at Cyberduck, and that's how we're explaining it to clients. And it is a change, but you don't have to send the whole company on a 3 weeks training, and the whole kind of the culture will take months or years to build. So just start small. That's one start with your development manager or the marketing team, and then it will climb up to the rank and permeates through the other departments. Would be my answer.
Yeah, it's basically spot on. It just to reiterate really and re-emphasize what you've already said, Sylv, is that I think the first and most important thing to consider when we're talking about changing the way that we work is that you need that buy-in on every on every part of the organization, but perhaps most importantly, you need it from the kind of management and the leadership teams in the business, because DevOps, as we've said, it's becoming a bit of a broken record now, but DevOps is a culture, and so you need to adopt that in every part of your business process. So if we take the traditional, like the agency example, DevOps culture has to be a part of the marketing effort, a part of the new business effort, a part of the kind of initial exploration and scoping efforts. And then, many steps down the line, it has to be part of the technical efforts in, kind of release engineering and development and so on and so forth. And then post-release support and refinement. So, if we try to approach this as a thing of kind of, how do I swap from tool A to tool B? We're only ever going to get limited benefit. If we're thinking in terms of how do I swap from FTP to Buddy, we've got a small piece of the pie, but we're missing out on the whole cultural change that can really benefit the organization if we tackle it as a cultural shift first. As I say, that requires, perhaps most importantly, buy-in from company leadership, because they'll be able to work with the kind of work and kind of set the agenda for the teams in the business and the kind of strategic plans of the company.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the organization as well. It could be, I was thinking like how it happened at Cyberduck, that was bottom up. So there's the team on the ground struggling with deployment and through R&D and just the general interest in kind of exploring new tech and not just changing to the next JavaScript framework or the next fancy language. We realized that. So that they started implementing it on one project, and then that came up through the ranks of the company and say, that makes sense. And to reach the CTO, say, we should do that more. And then we saw the benefits of it, and then clients loved it, and then it became a whole, as James said, now it's part of our marketing strategy, and everyone is raving about it. So that was bottom up. There might be a situation where there's a new CTO coming in place straight from the top, and there's been a legacy culture where engineers might just go treadmill style, like I've been doing it for 10 years. That's right. I can continue doing it and resistant to change. But then the CTO said, no, we need to move to the cloud. We need to implement DevOps. And then there might be some resistance, but the best teams are the one that embrace that change. And some developers might disagree and leave, but if it's the right decision for the company, then you'll be left with a good team where everything's aligned and the team will learn new things. It's very exciting as well. As a developer, you might get bored of doing always the same thing, or that's the innovation is also very exciting. So that could be also from the top and then going down to the dev team, but it depends on the company really.
Yeah, but I totally agree, because every time when I try to explain people how to start implementing CI/CD, the first thing I always say, and this is something that I always repeat, I emphasize, is never ever try to implement everything at once, because when you start reading about CI/CD, you will find about deployments, about unit testing, functional testing, this and that, and this is overwhelming, this is scary. And the moment when you try to implement everything at once, when you don't have this culture, you don't have a habit of writing tests, you don't have a habit of automation, nothing of it, it will just crash and burn. And the only thing that you will waste is some time and the money you spend on some applications that should help you automate this.
I
Always
agree.
go step by step.
Yeah, I agree. I think that changing one thing is an important. It's a good way of doing things. If you change two things and your process improves, you have a pretty good guess that one of those things worked, or possibly both of them. If you only change one thing and your process gets worse, you need to abandon it. But you might be in a situation when you change two things and it gets better, but actually one of those things made it worse. So changing one thing and small incremental changes to processes, and this works in life as well as technical delivery, is a good way of working out what brings the most benefit. And that is agile at the end of the day, isn't it? We're talking about small incremental changes that bring the biggest value. And DevOps is, inverted commas, it's an overhead. You have to have that function in your business, and that overhead is only worth it if it brings value. So you need to make sure, have confidence yourself as a business that the DevOps task, or the DevOps changes you're putting in place are making a big difference to your business. Otherwise, how would you know whether to progress? Hire a second DevOps.
True. And the last question we have is, what would you say is the most common blocker to business DevOps processes?
Could be in terms of kind of deploying that inside the company or to business processes. But it could be either the lack of understanding, I guess, where it could get quite technical, as you said, when talking about that. So either the lack of understanding, where again they've been doing it and might not be very efficient, but they haven't seen better. So that could be one way of resisting that change. Or the other way could be it's too overwhelming, because if you just Google DevOps tools or something, there's this diagram with 150 icons, and you don't even know where you wouldn't know where to start. So
I mean, when you Google for DevOps, you see these arrows that go infinite. So what is the sense if it will go infinite?
That explained the whole culture thing around kind of the process at all stages and continual improvement that can explain. So I think that would be the most common blocker, would be that either lack of understanding of the benefits of it, or it's overwhelming and resistant to change. But as I explained earlier, just need to start small and show benefits, and then can only grow from there.
Yeah, I think that whole people are generally scared of change. But we have a situation these days where 5-10 years ago you could have one developer doing their coding locally, FTPing it up to a piece of metal on a rack, sat somewhere in a server farm. Things have changed. We're much more specialist these days, generally, not just in technology. So I lead teams that develop Drupal websites. I don't actually do much development anymore, and I think you because we have the cloud and all these amazing tools like Amazon and all these platforms as a service, that you inevitably end up with people who have to be specialized in those areas. And that is a culture shift, which I guess James has already spoken to. So it's that reluctance to change, but if you don't change, you will just get left behind. So there is a certain amount of specialism you have to buy in, whether that's through recruiting or training, depending on the size of your business, or outsourcing. But change is always hard. But change has to be for a good reason, and convincing the people with the purses to open those purses and to spend them on the right things is not hard, but it certainly needs evidence. And this sort of webinar hopefully encourages some people to take that plunge.
Yeah. So Okay, so this was the last question we have. At the start of the webinar, we launched a poll on YouTube, and here are the results. The question was, is Drupal your primary CMS? And 73% of our viewers said yes, the Drupal is their primary CMS. So yes, that's really good, and it's also nice that
Correct answer.
and it's really great that the rest also stayed until the end to listen something about not their primary CMS, but to learn something new, to progress, and yeah, so this is this was really great. And before wrapping everything up, remember about our Buddy CI/CD group on meetup.com. You can follow us there, and you will be always informed about upcoming webinars. And like I mentioned earlier, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to this, you will be able also to get informed about the upcoming webinars, and you will have access to all the other things that we already made about mostly about CI/CD, DevOps, and but also we also had a webinar about accessibility. So this is a really great place to learn something new. So guys, thank you very much. I really enjoyed listening. I mean, I would be one of those 26% of people for whose Drupal is not their primary CMS, but I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. And so, like I said, thank you very much. And I really hope that at some point we will do a part 2 of this, right?
Look forward to it.
Happy to come.
Definitely.
Oh, okay, so the last thing we can do is just wave goodbye and thank you everyone for listening to us. So, bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.